The first shot cracked across the yard at Blazer's mill, and by the time the echo faded in the pines, the Regulators were already diving for cover. It was April 4th, 1878, the Lincoln County War raging, and a single man with a Winchester had just turned a planned arrest into a battle. Blazer's mill sat on the Tularosa River, a small settlement built around a sawmill and store run by Dr. Joseph Blazer. That morning, the Regulators rode in under their leader, Dick Brewer. Among them was 20-year-old William Bonney, not yet famous as Billy the Kid, but already quick on his feet and quicker with a Colt. They had sworn themselves to avenge the murder of rancher John Tunstall, their employer and friend, and they carried warrants that the law in Lincoln County enforced only when convenient. Their target that day was Andrew Buckshot Roberts, a former buffalo hunter and Army scout with the kind of reputation that follows a man into every doorway. Some said he wanted no part of the factions tearing the county apart. Others swore he was tied to the Murphy-Dolan ring responsible for Tunstall's death. Whatever the truth, Roberts was tough, accurate, and stubborn enough to mistake a demand for a dare. He had come to the mill to collect pay and see the doctor about an old wound. When the Regulators dismounted in a clatter of leather and iron, he was inside, eating at a rough plank table. Brewer tried to avoid a bloodbath. He sent Frank Coe to talk Roberts into surrender. Coe told him there was a warrant and that the Regulators would take him to Lincoln without trouble. Roberts looked up from his plate and said he would go to Lincoln when hell froze. He stepped out unarmed at first and asked to walk away. Then, doubting promises, he crossed the yard to his belongings, picked up a Winchester, and the morning hardened. The Regulators spread out across the yard seeking angles. Billy drifted left, hugging the wall. Roberts set his back to the corner post, rifle low, eyes level. Men shouted at him to put the gun down. He didn't. Later, no one agreed on who fired first. What everyone remembered was the sudden shock. The yard exploded with gunfire. Porch posts spat splinters, and the men who had come for an arrest scrambled for any cover that didn't howl or bleed. Roberts worked the lever of the Winchester like a man who had earned his supper with it. One shot tore through a Regulator's shoulder. Another ripped cloth off Charlie Boder's sleeve and drew blood. A third smashed bone in George Coe's gun hand and sent his revolver skittering across the boards. John Middleton lunged forward to break the standoff and took a ball in the torso that folded him down, groaning. Billy snapped 2 rounds that stitched the doorframe inches from Roberts's face. The smell of hot pine and black powder turned the air sour. Somewhere a woman sobbed and then strangled the sound in her throat. Brewer tried to reset the fight. He shouted men into a rush from 2 sides while 3 kept Roberts pinned. But the man they faced had spent years shooting in wind and glare. He leaned out, fired, and slipped back, reading their feet by shadow. The Regulators' advantage in numbers thinned to nothing under a rifle that did not waste a shot. Then Roberts was hit. A bullet struck him low in the belly and bent him to one knee. Blood came hot through his shirt. He caught the post with one hand, braced the Winchester across the other arm, and kept firing because that was the only thing that still made sense. The sight of a mortally wounded man refusing to fall rattled the Regulators more than the first volley had. Brewer decided to end it. He slipped around a stack of fresh-cut planks to take Roberts from the rear. Roberts caught the move in the corner of his eye, snapped the barrel, and fired. The ball struck Brewer in the face. He dropped where he stood and did not move again. The yard, already loud with shooting, felt suddenly quiet in the way places do when courage drains out of them at once. A few more exchanges snapped back and forth, angry, ragged, useless. Bowder dragged Middleton by the collar. Frank Coe clutched his torn hand and swore. Billy crouched, eyes raking for a weakness that did not appear. Roberts sagged but stayed upright, his boots planted, the rifle steady as if it, not the post, held him there. The Regulators broke. They had a dead captain, 2 badly wounded men, and nothing to show for it but powder smoke. They mounted, cursed, and rode out past the mill, glancing back to make sure Roberts wasn't coming. He wasn't. Locals eased him inside, and Dr. Blazer tried to save him because a man who fought like that earned the effort. The wound was mortal. Roberts died the next day with the same grim quiet he had shown on the porch. The gunfight at Blazer's Mill became a fixed point in the Lincoln County War, not because bodies piled up, but because one man nearly held off a dozen. It sobered the Regulators. Numbers and righteous anger had met a rifleman who did not care about their vows. For Billy the Kid, the lesson cut deep. He had seen gunfights, and he would see worse, but he had not often seen bravery like that, and he remembered it. Men who watched him later swore he checked corners more carefully after the mill, as if expecting a single barrel at every gap in every wall. The war itself churned on. Indictments, ambushes, and houses burned out under moonlight, courtrooms packed, then emptied by nervous jurors. Nothing at Blazer's ended it, but the tone changed. The Regulators moved with more caution. Their enemies respected their speed even as they hunted them. People who wanted no part of the feud learned to step off porches when armed men rode up. John Tunstall's death had started this chain. In February, deputies loyal to the Murphy Dolan store rode him down on open range, shooting him from the saddle and leaving his body in the grass. The killing shocked even a county used to rough justice. Brewer gathered Tunstall's cowboys, swore them to act as a posse, and for a time, the Regulators pretended their badges were enough. When judges hedged and sheriffs stalled, the badges hardened into a cause. From then on, every ride carried both warrant and revenge. Roberts, for his part, was not a paper villain. He carried old pellets under the skin and disliked talkers and crowds. He trusted his rifle and doubted promises. That stubbornness cost him his life at the mill, and it also wrote his legend. Brewer's funeral drew men who had called him boss and men who had called him friend. They said he had been brave and steady. Roberts was buried more quietly, but even his enemies spoke of his nerve. 2 graves, a day apart, told the county that courage is not a uniform. In later tellings, Billy sometimes loomed larger than the morning itself because fame prefers a familiar face. But the truth of Blazer's Mill was smaller and harder. A young outfit misjudged a single opponent. A dying man refused to give them the finish they expected. And a community learned, at least for a while, to take a breath before choosing a side. Years later, a traveler could stand where the boards once lay and measure the distances the fight had written in wood. The narrow lane Brewer tried to use, the corner that gave one man a command of the yard, the length a wounded rifleman could still hold. The saw long ago fell quiet, but the lesson stayed loud. Pride and powder are easy partners, and once a trigger breaks, stories outlive men. Thank you for listening to Deserted Trails. Subscribe for more forgotten stories from the old frontier.